134.50. Okay. Other place to buy British pound at 134.50. Actually, I will move lower to 134.49. Okay, position opened. Position opened at 134.49. Long position for British pound.
That a rate cut with QE is better than QE alone, which, you know, some people are saying, well, it would distort and things like that. Do you think we will see negative rates in the UK, and what would be an optimum time of going negative?
So I don't think we will see negative. Michael Saunders, as you rightly say, is towards the dovish end of the spectrum. But if we do see it, your second part of your question is absolutely spot on. When will it come? And at the virtual Jackson Hole, we heard Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey talking about actually the time potentially to go negative is as the economy is recovering. And we talked about with Tom about the savings ratio spike. If you're trying to encourage that discretionary saving to come back down and fuel consumption spending, then maybe introducing that shot into the arm of both asset purchases plus negative rates as the recovery takes hold may be the right policy prescription, and therefore paradoxically, as things get better, potentially the likelihood for negative interest rates increases in the UK.
Simon French, thank you so much. Just really, really interesting here. And again, this Brexit story, I really want to emphasize, particularly for those waking up in America, really a movable feast right now. In New York City, with our First Word News, here's Ritika Gupta.
Thanks, Tom. President-elect Joe Biden plans to fight the spread of the coronavirus from day one of his administration. In an interview on CNN, he said he would ask Americans to wear masks for the first 100 days he's in office. Biden has also asked Anthony Fauci to stay on as the government's top infectious diseases expert. President Trump is again threatening to veto a defense spending bill unless Congress also strips social media platforms of a key legal shield. Both parties have agreed on the bill, which authorizes military pay raises, amongst other things. The measure is expected to pass despite the president's veto threats. And the first U.S. state to tell residents to stay home to fight the coronavirus is about to do it again. California Governor Gavin Newsom warns that most of the state could be ordered to shelter at home within days. He says he'll order lockdowns on a regional basis once hospitals run short of intensive care beds. California has the fastest increase in infections since the pandemic began. Brexit negotiations have hit a last-minute bump. Trade talks that were on the verge of a breakthrough descended into a fight between the UK and France. British officials say the European Union turned up with a new set of demands. They aren't saying what the demands are. Global News 24 hours a day on air and a Bloomberg Quick Take powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ritika Gupta. This is Bloomberg. Francie?
Ritika, thanks so much. Our interview of the day is with Benoit Cœuré. He's the BIS Head of Innovation Hub, former ECB Executive Board member. Tom and I will have a robust conversation on the payment system. We'll also talk about cryptocurrencies and the use of these cryptocurrencies for central banks. This is Bloomberg. That is coming up shortly.
innovations, particularly sort of the technology landscape, have gotten to some pretty extraordinary levels. So I think it's not a surprise. I don't think it's any indication of the beginning of the end, but I do think markets don't like uncertainty.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance. I'm Francine Lackman, London. Tom Keynes in New York. Now, Tom, Bitcoin hovering at all-time highs, renewing interest, of course, in cryptocurrencies. The Bank of International Settlements, meanwhile, makes a case for central bank digital currencies. And we're delighted to be joined, Tom and I, by Benoit Cœuré. He's the BIS Head of Innovation Hub and former ECB Executive Board Member. Benoit Cœuré, thank you so much for joining us right here on Bloomberg Surveillance. Now, you put out a report amongst with central banks, which basically sets out the core principles for national digital currencies. Now, that is as some central banks around the world are actually publicly saying they're still evaluating. Are you surprised by the pace of change at which we could see in this space?
Well, first, good morning, and thank you for having me. I was surprised. I've been surprised last year. Yeah, and all throughout the year. 2020 clearly has been the year where research and experimenting on CBDC has taken a leap forward. I'm not surprised anymore, but I've been surprised, and clearly the pandemic has to do about it. Clearly that has been a big push to contactless payments and digital payments generally.
This, of course, is the role of CBDC as a part of the payment system, as opposed to monetary tools. Do you see that possibly changing in the future?
No, I see central banks around the world addressing CBDC primarily as a payment instrument, and that's driven by change around us. Change in and by the way, the system is changing at both ends, right? At the back end, we're seeing blockchain infrastructures, and we're asking ourselves how to bring central bank money to these new infrastructures. And at the front end, we are seeing a lot of new customer-friendly applications and new ways to pay. And here also we have to wonder how we bring central bank money to that end of the market. But it's primarily a payment discussion. It's not primarily a monetary policy discussion. That may change in the future, but I don't see that today.
Benoit, Nouriel Roubini is going to join us here later on Surveillance. He and many, many others really question the underpinnings of Bitcoin over to cyber currencies and what banking's trying to do. How can commercial banks affect this business without the taint of the crime and the scam associated with Bitcoin?
Well, there is room for everyone under the sun, so it's certainly not the central bank's intention to stifle innovation or to kill these markets. There is a lot of scope for innovation in the crypto space. What we want to do is to see it being safe for consumers. And that relates to anti-money laundering, combating the financing of terrorism, and so on and so forth. And so everything is possible, innovation is welcome, but regulation has been very strong and tight. And that's what you've seen happening since over the last years everywhere. And we also want to see how commercial banks can help develop the ecosystem. Banks shouldn't be defensive. They have a lot to gain. This will create new services to customers, and they have to embrace innovation and to use all these new means of payment to provide new services.
I strongly take your point there, and it's wonderful to see the BIS leadership here. If you look at a chart of Bitcoin, the major question here is the underlying value of it, unlike gold and, frankly, unlike fiat currencies, whether it's the French franc or the U.S. dollar. Do you, as one of the leading monetary authorities in the world, have a confidence in the underlying pricing of Bitcoin?
So, Tom, there is no French franc anymore, right?
Well, that's an important point. There's a lot of people that say, Benoit, that we're going to see Bitcoin drift away when the underlying becomes expanded and the value goes down. How does BIS deal with this debate?
I would agree with that. I think Bitcoin might be a good investment opportunity. I have no view on that. I'm not providing investment advice. That's not my line of business. But it does not have the features of a currency, because you want to see currencies being stable, and stability has to be underpinned by policy. and policy has to be underpinned by politics. And that's why central bank.
I'm placing a stop on profit for British pound at 134.51.
I mean, there are lots of opportunities coming with retail CBDC or general purpose CBDC, as we call it. But there is potential substitution with bank deposits. Certainly, we don't want to undermine the banking system. We see value in our financial intermediation being done by banks. But there are solutions. You can put limits. You can hardwire smart contracts in the system. You can make sure that any digital currency will be distributed by commercial banks. Central bank doesn't have to be directly involved in that business. So there are lots of ways to make sure that commercial banks will not be harmed, and on the contrary, that they can leverage this innovation to generate new services.
So what would be the best way to track it and enforce it? Is it one wallet per person? Is it going through the banking system, or is it something else?
Look at the solution.
Position closed at 134.51.
Just to state the obvious, preferences for privacy, customer attitudes to data protection, data ownership can be different across countries. And that can, in turn, lead to different architectures for CBDC. But what I'm saying here at a fairly general level is that we want commercial banks to stay as gatekeepers of that system. We don't want to push them out.
Benoit Cœuré, thank you so much for joining us with the Bank of International Settlements and head of their innovation hub. Futures up 12, Dow futures up 125. The VIX not giving me much yet, 21.05 on the VIX. Bonds correlate with yields out 2 basis points, higher yield this morning. Coming up, as I mentioned, boy, he does not agree on the value of Bitcoin. Nouri Roubini of New York University Stern School, and of course, NorialToday.com. Mr. Roubini is fired up, to say the least. This is Bloomberg. It's Jobs Day.